All right. The thing says it. We are recording. Let's kick off the music. Let's start Beeler.Cast. Oh my God. We did it. We had intro music play when it was supposed to play. I feel like we have arrived. I feel like we're ready for an audience.
It only
Perhaps
took 3
maybe
episodes.
maybe some people will tune in or listen to this podcast now that we've actually got the intro music done. Mark the Machine, well done. Well done, sir. Thank you. So that was Mark the Machine is helping out today as always. Sidekick extraordinaire. We'll see where this goes. He's made it to week 3. First 2 weeks, not so much. We have Nicholas.
Correct.
The mute.
Correct.
Well, he broke that already, so that nickname no longer works.
Oh, it's a shame.
And then we have Melissa, the collaborator, Melissa Chapman, who of course helps with all things Beeler.Tech, and will keep this ship afloat well beyond us driving it into the rocks. So thank you, Melissa, for you doing that. And so it's normally the fall, this particular time of year is in-person conference out the wazoo. Every day is another day to have some kind of event. Advertising week used to be about this time. We typically, there's so much of that stuff. And of course, not so much this year. We do have an event, I guess next week is happening in Miami. I'm not sure myself that I would be sending anyone that I cared to or love to Florida unless they were already there. Okay. And then we've got Ops, which will be in New York, October 4th and 5th. And Melissa and I have been working on that. Nicholas will be there. So it'll be a little Beeler.Tech reunion or business meeting, if you will, at Ops. And it's always exciting. Our guest, one of the reasons why I know Jonathan Mendez is that he was often a guest of mine at the Ad Monsters conferences. In fact, we're going to end the podcast with a little bit of an Ad Monsters flashback. So we'll go back to at least one moment. He might think of some others. He might want to divert on that. But I am excited about having Jonathan. He was one of the first people that I thought about for the podcast, in part because Jonathan's a straight shooter. We say that's the let's say positive way to put that. Jonathan drops bombs. Typically, that's what he did on Twitter in terms of ad tech. So that's kind of where we're going to start in terms of that conversation. Then we're going to talk about CDPs, which was an area of his focus. He's got an app that's coming out that he's been working on, and want to talk about that. And then we'll get to the flashback. But just real quickly, Jonathan's worked at Omniture, mostly known in my circle around YieldBot. And the only thing is, I'll say before Jonathan, let's kind of catch up and see what I've missed on all that, is that Jonathan will most likely say something that I completely and 100% disagree with, but I leave it as my option as to whether I take him up on it or not. I will choose wisely because that's the kind of guy that I am. Jonathan, is that a good enough setup? What did I miss about your past that we need to know, or anything else about you that we need to know before we start doing this?
That was wonderful, Rob. Thank you very much. It is a pleasure to be here with you and your illustrious crew, which I got to know a little bit before on the pre-call, and just honored to be a guest here on Beeler.Tech. I think you've covered it well. I've seen a lot in my 20 plus years in this crazy business. So happy to share a little bit of that with everybody.
Yeah. No, that's awesome. And thanks. And so let's kind of dive in again. So I used to follow your Twitter religiously. Yeah. Well, you're not quite as interesting as much anymore, because part of it is because you were an ad tech vendor, basically throwing ad tech under the bus on a daily basis. Someone would say something and you'd call bullshit on a daily basis. Am I wrong?
No, that is not wrong.
Okay, cool. So talk to me about that. So first of all, again, you were part of the problem while trying to fix the problem.
I was
Uh,
trying to fix the problem for sure. That's what drew me into the space, actually. I was a search guy before that, and got into display because I saw just how kind of seamlessly kind of crazy and corrupt and um I don't know what the right words are, but it just seemed to have lots of issues and challenges, and I thought there was a better solution. I guess it really was the cookie originally that drew me in, thinking that coming from search and understanding how search ads were matched based on intent and really explicit query, um, and that I looked at display and I saw that people were matching ads against these third-party cookies and kind of creating all of these strange profiles, and how really poor the data was being used, and the kind of lack of quality control with the data that was even being used. And I just felt like there was a better way to do it, so set out to build that,
and
and
boy
did.
did the industry prove you wrong. I mean, obviously, things have never been better, Jonathan. And the third party cookie is just stronger.
Yeah.
Wait, hold on a second. I'm getting a note from my. Never mind. Well, that was one of the things that you always brought up, right? Was that, if you look at search is a user, a person giving and explicitly calling out intent of what
Mhm.
they wanted.
Yeah.
And Google had built an engine to service that. And then here we are kind of tangentially trying to do the same thing, or pitching the same thing without really any guideposts to kind of keep it, right? Like, just in terms of how you thought about audience and
Yep.
so forth. So I think that was the number one area you kind of always attacked people on was, does this actually work?
Yes, because it doesn't work really. And I think what we were able to do at Yieldbot was actually build a display technology that was high performance, and I think uh, probably most similar to an ad network, because we had to kind of keep the data to ourselves, and we used our own first party data to kind of do our matching. We had our own ad server and whole ad system. So, it was really about understanding the data, learning over time, running machine learning and ML over those data sets to make them better. All kinds of things that, ad networks have had done and did back in the day. But it turns out that nobody really cares about the performance of display advertising, as we can tell through the click-through rates and issues with actually figuring out even if the ads are performing, formerly known as attribution. I think there was a lot of that was really a kind of eye-opening thing to me, is that at the end of the day, no one really, except maybe the brands, but no one really cared about the performance of the spend. It was more about spending it than it was actually understanding and getting good ROAS.
So we're built on a house of lies is basically, or at least
Um,
fluff, if you will.
well, yeah, because if you look at the data, right, the deeper you dig, and yeah, I mean, lies is is a
Well,
strong
so
term.
just to put this out there, I actually went stronger in my term than Jonathan is. So I just, perhaps we have changed. Perhaps we've all evolved here, Jonathan.
Oh, what's that line? Lies and something else. Yeah. Yes, there's a lot. I mean, listen, it's well known that there's a tremendous amount of fraud. There always has been a tremendous amount of fraud, tremendous amount of bad inventory. I mean, all of the display, kind of the pillars of display, inventory matching. I mean, there's all real issues there. And I mean, frankly, if you go back even further and you think about some of the early display, the pop-ups and some of the other things that were done back in the day. It was all kind of display kind of came out of this dark underbelly of the web in the beginning. And that's what really attached it to the cookie and kind of using the cookie in hacking the cookie, if you will, because it wasn't originally obviously, meant or created for what it was used for, but display people kind of hacked that to their own use. So yeah, I mean, if you get into it, maybe it was all built on a bunch of, kind of bullshit.
Well, let's put it this way. I know that I can't run for public office like at any significant level because all someone has to do is bring up that I served up pop unders as part of my job. That's all eh, votes lost. Like you were one of them. And I'd be like, I was one of those. I'd have to own up to it. So I'm curious though. And again, I don't know how much you watch this or care or whatever, but like between regulation, between what Apple's doing, between the death of the third party cookie to all this stuff, ad tech is obviously uh, starting to reap what it's sown to
Mhm.
that point. And I'm kind of curious if you have thoughts in terms of where this goes. In other words, will this get us back on track to your point about being a performant industry or medium, if you will, or channel? I'm trying to think of the right words. Uh, will we react that particular way, or what's your take on the future of ad tech and so forth?
Yeah, the future of ad tech is the large platforms as is the present, and they're only becoming stronger and more dominant. The walled gardens are getting higher. Those walls are growing. Yeah, I'm very bearish on open web and the open web ad ecosystem. I think that is really where there people are reaping what they sowed. And I think the agencies will be fine because they'll still be funneling monies into the platforms, so they have those relationships, although the platforms will always still try to intermediate and take more margin for themselves, and obviously growing sales teams working directly with clients. So I think that will squeeze the agencies somewhat. I blame the agencies a lot for what happened. I think they were one, they pushed the data story and the third party data tremendously. They built their own systems around it. They took those dollars from their clients without really their clients' best interests in mind. And we've I think we all know that. We've seen Pritchard and P&G and all these huge multinational companies come out, and the CMOs talk negatively about what's happened in display and with data and with privacy. So there's a lot of challenges there, but the platforms themselves also not to be trusted, as we know. Making up making up metrics for their clients, coming out years later saying, oh, this didn't really operate. It was a half a second we measured when we told you it was 2 seconds of view. I mean, those kinds of things. So yeah, I mean, it's also really hard to trust these large platforms as we see. So I think it's a challenging environment for advertisers and marketers, but I think it's has always been about, although it's been a slow roll, of having a more direct relationship if you're a brand with your customer. And I think we're seeing a lot more investment there, especially as of late, and brands building those capabilities and investing in that rather than media.
Yeah. Yeah. I mean, I think the part for me on that is that of course the platforms are going to serve a purpose and the agencies are going to use them. And I'm not thinking there's any way that anyone else is going to they're only going to put themselves out by their practices at some point. Again, if you were to play out that eventually the good guys eventually win in some way, shape, or fashion, or they don't, we'll see. But there's a part where I think
there are no good guys.
oh, okay. Well, see, he's back. This is what I was. That's what I was looking for, right? But see, here's the thing, right? Like, I think that there is an aspect of publishers are going to have to. So brands are going to work on their relationship with their customers.
Mhm.
They're always going to be looking for more customers and how to acquire them, and then again, treat them, even brands have to treat our people better, right?
Yep.
Publishers have a potential role in that if they can get that trust. And that comes down to, again, cleaning up how they approach all of this. It's been a
Yeah.
relationship that I think is assumed, but I think, okay. I
I
mean,
think the
again,
trust
like,
is gone. I think for the most part, the trust is gone between the brands and the publishers. I think the trust is gone everywhere. Listen, trust is gone in all of our institutions in the world right now. So no one trusts anybody. But getting away from
I trusted that you were going to say something like that. I
the
will say that.
geopolitical landscape for a second. Yeah, I think what's happening is brands will, and I think you're seeing this, and we'll continue to see it, right? Brands are taking their own content and their own publishing, in-house themselves, and using that as a way to one, reach their customers and the potential customers directly. Two, also, I think there's a big data component to that as well, so that's important. First party data. And so brands want to be able to get as much as they can of it. And I think that's really, kind of how this is going. Everything, my gosh, aren't we done with all the middlemen already? I mean, can't we get rid of all of these people in the middle between the brand and the customer? What good are they doing? All they're doing is driving up the prices,
siphoning things out. Look, every time I hear everyone going, "Oh, we're ready for consolidation," it seems like for one consolidation, 10 other companies pop up, right? But here's where I would leave with this, right? Is, well, not, we have to leave it here, but I would say definitely brands are going to do what you're talking about. Brands are going to continue to work with the major platforms. I think they're always going to be looking for that other channel for a different opportunity. I mean, look at it this way. There's always a piece where slapping an ad on something makes you more money than you had. And there's always someone that's usually willing to pay for that, right? You, in ways from just bumper stickers all the way up to Jeff Bezos and the watch that he wears when he goes up into space, right? Like there's any number of ways that all of this plays for there to be that other avenue. Now, do we need all the nonsense? No. And that's the part where I'm saying that's the part that I think starts to get cleared up, because you can't, as a publisher. Yeah. I mean, Beeler.Tech has swag, right? That gives you an idea that you could slap an ad on anything. Thanks, Mark. So you hit on data though. And I want to talk to you because, again, you shifted your focus to CDPs, and I'm really kind of curious as to the state of CDPs, what you're thinking about is going on in that space. And, I'm sure we'll have some questions for you there.
Yeah. So when I was at YieldBot, Q4 16, we were the fourth largest ad network out there behind Google, Facebook, Yahoo, and as measured by ComScore. Although we talked about measurement a little earlier, so who really knows?
Yeah, Jonathan.
ComScore is another subject altogether. We'll stay away from that. As is Nielsen. Really interesting. All of these, a whole bunch of cast of characters in the measurement space. But leaving that aside, what we saw a lot of headwinds that quarter. It was the election quarter too, if you remember that election. And so we had a lot of headwinds. We missed our numbers that quarter. And for me, it was a big wake-up call that we had to kind of change the direction that we were going to, and really be less reliant on agencies and agency deals. One of the reasons we missed is agencies were moving everything to their desks. They wanted to use their own data. They didn't care about performance, all of that stuff. So, and it was at that time that I felt like we needed to change the direction of the business and actually get closer to the brands. We had first party data. They had first party data. There was, I think, a lot of interesting ways to combine that data and for us to become less of an ad tech company and more of a MarTech company. our board of directors didn't see it, and some people in the company didn't see it the same way. They actually wanted to get deeper engaged in third-party data, and as you know, Rob, that's not something I'm interested in. So I left and started getting involved in what was, kind of wasn't even really called that at the time, really just kind of emerging as the customer data platform space, and meeting with brands. And actually, the first thing I did, I went to work for J. Crew and started building their in-house customer data platform for them with some really other smart and amazing people, and that was fascinating experience. But I think at the end of the day, again, kind of following the data and who owns the data and who has data quantities and can use that data to understand customers better, to anticipate their needs. To target them effectively with relevant messages. Brands have all of that, and they have that direct relationship with the customer. So there's no issues of privacy there at all. And so that became a really interesting space for me, and I really dove in head first. At the build level, at the ground level, really starting to build CDPs and understanding the players in the space. Many of the independent players, especially in New York City, there's a bunch of really, awesome CDPs there. So New York, interestingly, was more of a home for CDPs than maybe even ad tech. And so, that was an amazing few years for me. Kind of building in that space and getting to understand the power of that data and what can be done with it.
Yeah, and I think, and so to me, that was an interesting part where you and I started talking, and again, there's a part, just something that you just kicked off in my head is a recent conversation where we hosted we hosted some people from the buy side and people from the publishing side, and said, where's the area to focus on how we could all connect, and everyone to a person said first party data, and then I had to kind of alert everyone to the fact that when they said first party data, they weren't talking about your first party data. They're talking about whatever you use the term, you're talking about your first party data. To everyone else, that's third party data, unless you're connecting it, that is second part. Like there's a piece there that like almost whenever, and I remember like just talking to you about it, and even myself catching myself going like, when you're talking about a CDP for a brand, right? That is their customers, that's their CRM,
Yep.
Extrapolated to the idea of profiles and so forth. As a publisher, I love the idea of profiling, but I'm doing it at a certain number. I'm just doing a version of a DMP, if you will, because I don't really have that relationship.
Right. ...
Unless that's where we're going.
Yeah.
Which,
I mean, the brand knows who I am. They know my name. They know my address. They know my email address. I'm happy to give it to them. I need to receive those items I purchase online. They have to show up at my door. If they can text me special offers, maybe they have my phone number. If I go on my mobile, whatever it is, that's not as a consumer, I'm okay with that. And as a brand, that is incredibly valuable, right? I mean, that is the kind of atomic unit of data collection, the customer ID, and to be able to build tables in a database around that and start to understand the relationships of who I am and the products I buy and the things I browse and what I'm interested in and where I live, and all of these things are incredibly powerful tools for brands to be able to leverage and to do so in a privacy compliant way. So that is, to me, so powerful. And then on the flip side, we can get into this a little bit, but, I mean, obviously you saw right away Google, jump on this with what they were doing in terms of being able to use differential privacy and join that data together if I'm a brand with the Google data, right? And of course, Google knows me as well. They certainly know who I am. They certainly know more about me than probably anybody in the world.
They know who you are, Jonathan.
And but that's fine. Like, their products are free and they're great, and I'm happy to make that exchange, right? That's the thing that always got lost in data is, people are happy to provide data if there's a value exchange there. So if I'll give the brand my address. I'm happy to give Google my phone number for two-factor authentication, when I'm logged out or logging back into my Gmail or to Chrome, right? So these are really important things, and there are benefits to me as a consumer on both ends. So I think that's the nexus of the first party data and kind of the future. And, what I was at the time really interested in, especially differential privacy and how that could be used. And, what's emerging now with these ideas of clean rooms and places where data can be brought together in a privacy compliant way. And that to me, was fascinating. And I think, got me into that. And, I still think that's the future as far as, a first party data goes. But again, it is a platform future for the most part. I mean, there will be independent, vendors in there trying, and there are, and CDPs, trying to make a go of it. And I think that's great. I'm a startup guy. I'm on my fourth startup. I love it. More power to those people. But the leverage that these platforms have, whether it be Google or Microsoft or Amazon, in the CDP space, we've seen Salesforce and Oracle, right? I mean, these are, now that you're getting into databases, these are tough competitors. They have quite the sales teams already. Right. They're on-prem, so it's a challenging space as well.
Well, it's interesting you mentioned MarTech, and there's this whole convergence that's happening between ad tech and MarTech, this mad tech kind of terminology that's been out there. And I think for some publishers that are not traditional publishers, but that are retailers that are becoming publishers, or retailers or brands that are becoming these direct to consumer plays where they're trying to build on their first party data, things like CDPs become very important. And I've been shopping around for one, actually. So I've had a little bit of a chance to kind of see the differences between, the purpose of a DMP versus a CDP and why those things matter. And I like that, that take on, could you, start to blur those lines if you're a retailer or a publisher or a brand that also is in the advertising business too, and you're taking advantage of your first party data. And, there's 8,000, MarTech companies out there. I don't know how many ad tech companies are subcategorized in that list. So there is a lot of independents out there, and they're not all the big players in the market. Yep. But it is fascinating how there's been this little bit of a change in the last couple of years. With, do I need all these 3-letter acronyms? Do I need a DMP, a CDP?
Yeah. Well, you mentioned something that I thought was interesting while I was in the space, which was really one of the problems I saw in the CDP space was that it hadn't yet kind of verticalized itself, where you had CDPs that were focused on small business, or you had CDPs that were focused on only enterprise, or CDPs focused in banking versus retail. Or, at the time that I went in, everyone was still kind of feeling around, getting whatever deals they could. Now, of course, everyone has those different entities have their own needs. Different verticals have their own needs. Different channels have their own needs. So, you even whatever product you're making, it's not a one size fits all, especially in B2B, most especially in B2B. So, I think that was one of the challenges that the space had early on, was almost defining itself. And I think we're a little further along with that now. But we'll see.
But I think the intent was to build this utopia of the 360-degree view of the customer. And, there are some companies that do that and do it well. And there are other companies that are still struggling to kind of fit all those pieces together. And I think, some of the CDP vendors have been agnostic, where they're like, hey, we just sit in the middle and we're your connection point. And they don't want to be in one side of your business or another. So I think it's interesting as you start to dive into the companies. There are some that are, one size fits all, and there's others that it's like best of breed, and you have to bring all these different components together.
Yeah. Well, I'm a customer data guy, so I feel like, when I was working with brands, on the CDP space, my prerogative was always, this is data you use, in all parts of this is not just marketing and advertising data. This goes into financial projections. You could use it for merchandising. You could use it to help understand supply chain. I mean, there's so many areas where, customer data is the lifeblood of any business. And so that was really actually one of the things that excited me the most about CDPs, is that it felt like, that data could be used everywhere. Now, of course, in large organizations, there's a lot of bureaucracy and politics and, things like that. So people have legacy systems. They have great relationships with those legacy vendors. It is really hard to, steer the ship, the bigger the company you get.
And they have another challenge too, right? Which is, in my mind, one of the things I think a lot about right now is some of this thing about privacy and what does it mean to say to Procter and Gamble, you're okay to collect information. And then I realize, wait, to Procter and Gamble means all of those brands and everything they own. That's not quite what I as a user signed up for. And so there's a part of that that gets really interesting in terms of the relationship again to the consumer, so they understand who they actually have a relationship with, right? Add the bureaucracy, then add to the fact that does the consumer, and do you need to explain that, this company that you thought was a local soap company is actually owned by a mega conglomerate entity type of thing, right? So it's tough to see how that plays out.
It's a real challenge for CPG. I think the first party data, there's no question. At Yobot, we had a very large shopper marketing business, so we understood that space really well and the challenges there. And I think that is a lot of why the CPGs bought some of those early DTC brands, is that because they had that direct relationship, and it's the data is incredibly valuable, and that data can potentially be modeled out and be used elsewhere. But obviously I'm not sure how well. I think there's varying degrees of success with how that has gone. And there's also varying degrees of success with just DTC in general. It's, seems to, there's been a lot of successes, of course, but, obviously, especially now with iOS 14 and rising CAC costs, it'll be interesting to see what happens to those businesses. But again, there's no question that the direct relationship with the customer and the ability to have a value exchange where you can acquire their data is the lifeblood for all marketing, go forward.
I want to keep an eye on time, because this is something we could go down this for a long time. I'll say one thing that I'll share with you and just throw this out there for you to shoot down or whatever. Because at one time you and I were discussing this about, I at first thought CDPs would be a feature of DMPs, and you said no. DMPs is a feature of CDPs. But what we just actually talked about is something I just occurred to me. One factor that I've been trying to think about again, as you think about the future of a privacy regulation to the end of third-party cookies and whatever, is the verticalization of a solution that can work for publishing. Right now, again, that's not where you're putting your bets and so forth. And I get that, but there is a piece of it of something that like one of the things around all those tools was like, as if you had that data for all time to build up over time. And I got a feeling that there's a time component to this that hasn't been factored in, that like speed is like everything. And to be able to create and think in terms of a profile and a segment and create this and then figure out what you're going to do. Do I sell them? Again, as a publisher, more publishers are coming out with e-commerce solutions. Can I sell them a product? Can I get them deeper into my brand? Or do I get them in with my partners who are my brands that are advertising? Is this whole little new dichotomy that I think is going to start to see. And if someone can figure that out, that's a really interesting space to be.
It's going to be tough sledding for publishers. I think it was interesting when you were talking about kind of, time series and understanding things over time. One of the unique things we did at Yobot was we put our code was in the ad slot. And once it was in the ad slot on a publisher, we were able to see that those ad slot on a URL, right? That that's pretty consistent unless you redesign your site. And, we were able to get performance on those slots over years and really understand, and then, match that back to, okay, how did that person get to this page? And what was performance like on that ad slot versus someone coming from this link, or someone coming from this link? Because again, links are static, right? The navigation of a site is static. The links in Google are static. So there's all this incredible data that gets accumulated over time. And of course, the more data you have, the smarter you are. I think Vint Cerf famously said Google didn't have better algorithms than any other search engine. They just had the most data. So, I think that is something that gets really lost when you think about data collection, is having that data over time and understanding it and getting the quantities of it. And I think that's an area that publishers, have not ever not ever taken advantage of, and it's a bit of a shame. Again, so we were able to see the benefit of that, and the ability to make matching decisions on what ads to serve based on the historical data. So really your point is well said.
So you're just envisioning an internet without any websites. It's just the search engine. No, I'm kidding. But I do. But well, you have made a shift. You have made a shift to apps, right?
Yes.
And you've gotten religion.
Yes.
Can you talk about where your latest focus is?
Yeah. So one of the things, there were two things when I was in the CDP space and starting to think about what was next for me, after doing consulting and basically being a hired gun. And I wanted for sure to do something in consumer because I had done a lot of B2B, and I started actually in e-commerce doing D2C back in 1998. Sorry. And so I'm apologizing to myself for being so old. And so I really wanted to get back to consumer because I love that, and kind of full circle for my career. And then of course I also wanted to be in the app world because I felt like the web, whatever they're calling it now, Web 3, I guess we're on. I just not bullish about the web with all the challenges that exist, and privacy and hacking and et cetera, et cetera. So I wanted to be in the app space. That was, I think, a better place to be for consumers. So I actually was looking for roles and ideas, and my co-founder Bradley, basically I met him. He came up with this. He had this idea of Facebook for religion, and I thought, oh, that's somewhat interesting. I'm not an incredibly religious person, but this is when COVID was just happening, and I had a friend who was very ill and in the hospital. And what I noticed was everybody got really religious very quickly. And so, which makes sense and is understandable. And of course, a lot of people needed their faith at that time, and still do. And I had a ton of respect for that and understand the need. And I myself needed it a bit too during that period. But I was starting to become aware, that there just wasn't a lot there digitally. So with COVID, when it hit, worship shifted online like everything else, like we're doing Zooms right now. And actually attendance went up through the roof, really, for religious leaders and institutions. But the community aspect of religion, which is huge, right? You're in a men's club, or you're on a softball team, or, you're doing a fundraiser, or, youth education, or all these aspects that are present in community aspects of faith and religion. They didn't transfer with COVID because there wasn't anything for that. Religious leaders had built Facebook groups, or had WhatsApp, or used their email for that. So I saw this real opportunity to build an app as a service to faith and religious community, so people can come on, create community, build community, no matter what faith you were, and for us to provide the tools and services for free for them, and to help them have a place to organize, grow in the modern world. So that's what I've been doing. It's called exalt.app. If you go to the website, we do have a website, just we need to have a website for certain things, like a privacy policy and such. But we have a little video there. It tells you a little bit about what we're doing. But we've been working on it now for about close to a year and a half. We're almost ready to launch in App Store, and we've had some tremendously positive feedback. So it's a really exciting place to be. Really exciting, learning a lot, learning a ton. A great team of people helping me with this. So it's been a fantastic experience so far.
That's really interesting, and I look forward to seeing what you built. And I'm going to allude that I would easily make jokes about you putting faith in faith when you won't even put faith into measurement systems in digital ad tech, but those things write themselves. They don't even need to be said. We're all thinking them, so they can all do that. But it's again, I think that's a really interesting story, and especially coming out of the genesis of that. So thanks for sharing with that.
No pun intended, Rob.
No. Again,
yes,
some of the stuff writes itself.
Very good. You are, yes, impressive.
Just blessed sometimes when it comes to this. So this is something we, again, we're kind of beyond where I thought we'd land in terms of time with this, but if you're willing to take an Ad Monsters flashback, it's very possible that I'm going to create this kind of series with this. You know what, Mark? Cue the music.
All right. Or Stranger Things vibe.
Well, it's a knockoff. So Mark was able to get a CD from a guy in the street, and what was the name of this the music there, Mark?
It's Mysterious Strange Things.
Yeah. So just for anyone listening in on this podcast,
the worst part about it is I've infected my computer with a bunch of viral malware now.
That's right. So Jonathan actually has talked to a number of ad monsters, and again, I've been the guy who reaches out to him to have him speak, right? Like I've been trying to do that, and it's even invited you after this particular incident, and I want to make sure that you have. I'm gonna pause every once in a while to allow you to defend yourself.
I'm excited.
So where I'll start with this is just actually an event before that where I was in London. And I had a keynote speaker who was a little nervous, and I could see he was nervous. And because there had been some history there, I actually had a waiter deliver him a beer while he was on stage. Right. So it was pretty awesome. It was, again, a guy, with a plate, handing him a beer, and he's like fucking brilliant. And boom, downs it. And next thing you know, his keynote's there. But then from that point on, every session after that, all of my speakers were like, "Where's our beer?" And it one, it became expensive, and two, it became the shit show that you can imagine an event coming when you just continually just piling drinks on or whatever. I know that I told Jonathan this story. I had told him at an event in New York about this, to which he proceeded to then start having some cocktails, some Heinekens, I believe was
I do remember they were Heinekens. Yes.
See, so you do remember some, and maybe that's what this whole thing is about, is helping you remember, because I had a wrap up panel with you. I think it was Alan Singer is the name. I think that pops in my mind. And I have never lost control of a conversation quicker than you and Alan no, it wasn't Alan Singer. I'm thinking of someone else. I will think through who it was. He was pontificating about the role of advertising and whatever. Jonathan, do you remember what you were doing while you were up on stage and what you were talking about?
Sounds like I was drinking Heinekens.
You were drinking Heinekens and pretty much telling everyone in the room that they were fucked. It was pretty much what your takeaway was. So,
well, I'm sure they've all gone on and gotten promotions and now are the leaders of the ad tech industry. So I was probably wrong.
See, and that's the closure I think that I needed, because there's it isn't in circulation. There was a video, like we did like a little sizzle reel of the event, and the look on my face while you were talking. So there's a scene of you talking and whatever. And just the look in my face of just complete, I look like Sam the Eagle. Like I didn't even know my face could kind of do that, but it was literally just like, how could you? Because again, and you had empties on the stage, like you had Heinekens underneath you on that stage. So
I remember
that's what this whole podcast is about, was to call you out on this.
it was an agency guy, so obviously he was spewing bullshit. But and I think I know who it was. I don't remember his last name now, but it was Andy something, I think.
Andy, you're right. So
Yeah.
that Alan Singer, because Alan Singer is actually a really good guy. We
Let's
work
not.
with. It's close to that. So we'll leave it at that.
Okay.
You know what? How about this? Keep subscribe to the podcast, and if you see that I have a guest named Andy, it could be Andy, and then I'm going to bring him out, because apparently this is what this has become. Now that I realize this whole podcast is a revenge thing, where I get to kind of call out people who gave me, problems with my session. So I feel good.
Beeler's Revenge. That's a little more. No, I see Mark likes that. It's a little more.
That's something to. Yeah, it might be harder to get guests.
More clickbaity.
Yeah, exactly. So, well, I'm glad to have outed you and make people realize the kind of individual that you really are, Jonathan. The disguise behind this the thing that I set you up for. So I got my revenge. No, seriously. Thank you for being someone who kind of, again, stirs up the conversation. You definitely do that, and appreciate you doing that here, giving some ideas about where people should be focused on. That's always really helpful. And Jonathan, thanks for being a guest on what we're going to call the first episode, because the first two, let's just say we had some rough spots. I think this time we actually made it through. So Jonathan, thank you.
Oh, wonderful! It's my pleasure, and thank you for having me. And always enjoy speaking with you, Rob, as you know.
You got it. Machine, cue that end music.